Welcome to 2020.
2020. This is the first episode of the new year. We are a little bit late. We said we were going to be back mid-January, but that didn't happen.
Well, this is the first one we're recording. This might not be the first one we're dropping to the public, though.
I don't know. We'll see. Anyways, we are happy to be back, and we are happy because we have a special guest today. Another one of my dad's friends, and another person that actually likes cigars. I didn't realize how many people like cigars.
Why do you think I like them so much?
I guess that's why. So today,
nice and relaxing.
Dad, why don't you introduce?
Everybody, this is Lorenzo Presutti with Sharp Appraisal. We're going to be talking about appraisals today. Welcome, Lorenzo.
Thank you. Buon anno, and I'm glad to be here.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful.
This is exciting because I don't think a lot of people really understand the mechanics behind appraisals, what you guys do. I think that most people know, if you're buying a property, your house has to be appraised.
In most cases, right? In most cases, houses will get appraised.
And that's I think, the extent of what people know. So we're going to dive deep and try and figure out what exactly it is you do and how you do it, how you impact the real estate market.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny you say that because every time we go to a home to do an inspection, like we're in the home for like 20 to 30 minutes, taking notes, taking pictures, and then we're gone. Mm-hmm. And a lot of buyers or a lot of the people looking for financing saying, I don't understand. They were here for 20, 30 minutes. How can they come up with a value? But we do a lot of work behind the scenes,
right?
To come up with our values and our analysis.
I got to tell you, from dealing with buyers and sellers in real estate, dealing with other realtors, most people really don't have a clue as to what an appraisal is. I know the general public throw the word appraisal, market value. They'll call me because they're thinking of selling and they need a price. They want what we would call, say, a home evaluation. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And they call me, hi, Santo, we're thinking of selling. Can you come and appraise our house? And I know what they're thinking. They're thinking they want a market value, but they call it appraisal. So we'll get into all that, the differences and all that. Why don't we start off with you introducing yourself, a bit about your company, your history, just kind of introduce yourself to everybody.
Oh, that's great. I'd love to do that. Santo and I, Santo's a real estate agent, and that's how our first, relationship started. But myself, I've been an appraiser for almost 20 years now. Long time in the market. Yeah, my background is appraising. I hold a real estate license, but I don't practice real estate because it's too hard to do two things at once.
They're both full-time jobs.
Yeah, they're both full-time jobs. So I specialize in just real estate and residential and commercial real estate.
Appraising.
Yeah. Have a background, like I said, in real estate, in contracting, construction. So that all kind of led me into the appraisal field. Mm-hmm. And our company is a full-service firm here in Vaughan.
Sharp Appraisal, it's called.
Yeah,
where in Vaughan?
Right over here at Keele and Rutherford Road.
I say that because I've never, for anything we've ever done, I've never had to go to your office.
Yeah.
I mean, you always, I call or you call me, and it's always whatever that property is, or a client calls you and you're going to the home. Nobody goes to your office.
It's like
really.
your office at Jane and Rutherford. And we're right around the corner, and I think we've only met. Well, I met once at your office there. But with the computers and email, it's so easy to just
you don't need to have that kind of office presence, especially in the field that you guys are in.
Right.
But so that's interesting. So
our firm is, like I said, we're over here at Keele and Rutherford Road. We have 6 appraisers and 2 full-time staff. Mm-hmm. So we're able to cover a wide area from as far west as Burlington to as far east as Pickering and far north as Barrie. So we do a lot of real estate appraising in the GTA.
A lot of people have no idea. I'm telling you. Yeah. We were talking just before this off the air. There's so many things about appraising and just how busy you are and the need for what you do that it's just a lot of people I know don't understand. So I'm excited to be doing this with you today. Let me ask, do you need a special license to be an appraiser?
That's a very good question, and the answer is yes. Okay, we go through a vigorous amount of courses to become an appraisal. It's actually, to get your designation takes 2 years of articling minimum. And, right now you need a degree to become an appraiser. So,
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So we have different classifications for appraisal. We have what we call an AIC candidate, and he's new, he's learning, or he or she is learning the business. They've gone through the required courses, and now they work for a company under mentorship. They go through more courses as they're being mentored, and they're being taught by, someone like myself or someone more senior. Now, that they're what we call a candidate appraiser, and they become a member of the Appraisal Institute of Canada.
Wow.
Yeah. Myself, I'm a CRA, which is a certified residential appraiser, and that's even more courses.
Whew,
Yeah.
You made me nervous for a second. Right, you're
There's
a
more
CRA. You don't
CRA.
work for the
No,
CRA.
no. A lot of people.
I got to tell you, beads of sweat started forming here.
Watch what you say. Yeah, and then we have the what we call an AAIC, and that person there can appraise any type of real estate, commercial plazas, commercial buildings, apartment buildings, vacant land. So we have several designations that we go through, and our Appraisal Institute of Canada. That's our governing body. We're self-governed, and they make sure that we're all doing the proper things, appraising the proper way, and we have certain designations that we have to do.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
So, Danny, so what he's saying is, and this is why I'm not an appraiser, he's saying you got to be smart to be an appraiser.
Sounds like it.
This is why...
It sounds like it.
Smart is
why.
up to interpretation.
Wow. Well, most people don't understand the word. They'll ask me, like I said earlier, they'll ask me for an appraisal. They don't really need, and so I normally follow up with a question back. What do you need the appraisal for? I'll use the word back to them. And then when they tell me, if they say, well, we're thinking of getting a second mortgage and they asked us for an appraisal, then I'm thinking, oh, so they actually do need an appraisal. And that's not me. That's when I would call you. Or they say, we're thinking of selling, and we just want to kind of know what we can get for our house. Yeah. And the process of selling, well, now I'm thinking more market value. Why don't you help us out there? Appraisal, market value.
Opinion.
Yeah. Letter of opinion.
Yeah,
I've done a few of those where they say we don't need something as official as an appraiser. Exactly. Why don't you just kind of walk us through that?
And we get a lot of requests for letter of opinions, but we don't do them in our firm because we're more we look more of the market, and we look at more of the data and become. First of all, we have to define what is an appraisal. An appraisal is more. It's a written formal document, and it's intended. You need 4 things. Basically, it's a written formal document where we do our analysis and we come up with a report and an analysis. You need a client, and typically our client is, let's say, the bank or the lender or the homeowner wanting to know what the value of their for information purposes only. So you need a specific client in mind and a certain purpose. What's the purpose of the appraisal? Is it for financing? Is it because I want to sell my house? Is it an estate? Is it that I'm going through a divorce and I want to know, what the value of my home is so that we can, split the assets, So that's another, thing. And one of the most important is it's an opinion. It's an opinion of value that we formulated. And, everybody has an opinion, on, I can give data to you and you'll come up with, a different opinion than I. Hopefully, as appraisers, that we've taken the same courses and the same analysis, we should be within a certain range. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be something that is, one person comes in at $1 million and the other one comes in at 100,000. It's a big range. So, the basis that we do is we try to determine what the purpose of our appraisal is for. And 9 out of 10 times it's for lending purposes. Like, for example, like you said, a client wants to know what their house is going to be appraised at because they're going for a second mortgage.
Yeah. And then the bank won't take me as a realtor saying, oh, this home is worth $1 million.
Correct.
They won't take what I say as gospel, as like, oh, it's the realtor, we got to believe him. They won't take that because I take different things into account than say you might.
Well, you come up with an opinion of value, and when you're going and you may do the same type of analysis or you may have the same type of data, But when you're approaching, correct me if I'm wrong, when you're approaching your potential seller, you're saying, this is the data that I have, and your home should, if it's in specific market conditions, should sell at this value.
Correct.
Okay?
Yeah.
Whereas what we do is we'll take a look at that same data. However, we'll go deeper and we'll say, okay, what's the difference between house A and house B? And we adjust, to hopefully make it into a common value, it's an unbiased opinion, indicating that, okay, house A had, 3,500 square feet, house B had 3,100 square feet. So we try to determine what's that 400 square feet, worth on the market. And, we try to compare it to the actual house.
Okay, so let me ask on that, on square footage, because
Sure.
I want to get the idea of a cross, and it's not a clear straight line, the difference between an appraiser and a realtor. In my opinion, sometimes I know from talking to people, there's a bit of a, what's the difference when it comes to price? So when you look at that square footage, 3,500 versus 31, I will also kind of look at the layout. And sometimes the 3,100 square foot layout just appeals to more people than the 3,500 square foot, just because of the way the walls are split, just the layout, the floor plan of the house. Do you take that into account?
So we'll look at the floor plan as well, how functional we have it. We look at it and we say, how functional is that floor plan? For taking your example from a 3,100 and a 3,500 square foot, you may try to squeeze 5 bedrooms in a 3,100 square foot home.
Right.
So your bedrooms are smaller. So we kind of look at that as well, and we say, well, it makes no sense. That should be a 4-bedroom home. Okay. Whereas, when you're looking at a 3,500 square foot home and you have a home that maybe has 3 bedrooms in it, you're kind of wondering, well, that home should have 4 bedrooms. And then, in further analysis, we may speak to the homeowner and says, oh yeah, we took out this partition wall, but we can easily put that up to make it back into a 4-bedroom home. So floor plan and its functionality is very important as well.
Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We look at that as well.
Great. Okay.
Because that all determines your value, the value of the home. If your home, like in today's marketplace, a typical home built today, you should have minimum 9-foot floor to ceiling height. So if you're in a subdivision that's brand new, and all the homes in your neighborhoods are 9-foot floor to ceiling height, that was as an upgraded feature, and you're appraising a house that has maybe an 8-foot ceiling, that's going to take away from the marketability of that home.
100%.
Yeah, so
100%. And now they're coming in at 10 and 11. We're seeing.
Exactly. Waffle ceilings, flat ceiling, pot lights, all that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who are your clients? Like, who would call Lorenzo and say, or your firm and say, I need an appraisal?
That's a very good question. Our client is the let me try to step backwards, and like your client is typically your buyer or your seller.
Yeah.
Okay, so my client is the person who orders that appraisal. So let's say, for example, a mortgage broker is ordering an appraisal because it's going to a bank. Okay, at the end value, the bank is my client because I owe him an unbiased value on the home. So that lender would be my client, and he or she or the bank is the one that has gets the report, and it's their report. It's not the homeowner's report, even though the homeowner may pay for the appraisal. It's the bank's possession. It's their property for that appraisal. They're my client.
Whoever pays for it owns the report.
No. That's where the whole
You're right. You're right. Yeah. I've seen the buyers sometimes pay for it.
Exactly.
And they never see.
And that's the biggest, I paid for the appraisal. When you're not paying for the appraisal, you're paying for the service of us coming in, to do the appraisal. The determination of value, but the property of it belongs to the bank.
So I have a question now, because if someone, let's say they want to refinance or they want to get a second mortgage, and they want to speak to or they want to get an appraisal done, if a client was to call you and say, "Hey Lorenzo, I need you to come in and do an appraisal on my property," and then he takes that appraisal to the bank, will that bank use that appraisal? Because I know sometimes banks have their own appraisers, right? So how does it work in that sense? Is he getting that report just for himself to know what the bank's appraisal will come in at? Or is he getting a report to know that he can send to the bank and say, I got an appraisal done and this is what it came in at?
Well, first you have to remember an appraisal is what I said earlier. It's an opinion of value. And, hopefully that if we have the same data, we'll come out to the exact same number. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way because, it's not scientific where we put in all these numbers and it spits out a value. Basically when we're doing an opinion of value, an appraisal for a homeowner, it'll be for information purposes only. This is what we think, your home, might sell for, or this is what the market value of your home is. And we will put stipulations in it that it's not for mortgage purposes. So if you were to take that appraisal and go to a private lender, or to a mortgage or to a bank and say, here, I have an appraisal done, my SHIP appraisal. This is what they think my value is. One of two things can happen. The bank may call me directly and say, hey, Lorenzo, is this appraisal legitimate? Is it a proper appraisal? Okay, is it something that you did? And and then at that point, I can have a discussion with that lender. When you're going for mortgage financing, what we're doing is we're also is for that specific lender. So the homeowner wouldn't get a copy of that report because he can shop it. He or she can shop it, to different lenders. And with today's technology, it's possible to scan a document and fudge the numbers. I'm not saying, that happens with,
fraud is in every industry. It could happen.
Sure.
Every industry has, so there's checks and balances, usually from the people that are at risk, like the banks. They're at risk of lending money.
So that's why the banks like to use, or they recommend, from a list of appraisers. If you're going to have an appraisal done, we would like it to be done by, one of these. So then they're familiar with that appraisal firm. They're familiar with their integrity, and that they can go back and say, okay, we trust this appraisal.
Okay. And another question for you is, so I feel like a lot of people can understand why a lender would need an appraisal done. But there's other reasons too, for personal reasons, right? So if someone's getting, let's say, a divorce and they want to figure out the value of the property, then they would call you and you'd go in there, check it out, and tell them, this is what the house is worth, and then they could, I guess, split that or however they decide to do that, right? But what are some of the other personal reasons that
I can answer that. And I'll get it back to you.
Are you the guest?
Yeah, this is where I cut people off. Part of the show is me cutting people off when they're speaking. As a realtor, I could call in an appraiser. Sometimes I run into properties that are just difficult to price. It's one thing if the home is in a subdivision and there's so many examples of recent solds, but what if it's a rural property, 50 acres, the last one sold, or it's an industrial unit that's been specially designed for that particular purpose. It's a big warehouse. Sometimes, or it's a custom-built home. There's sometimes there just aren't examples of other sales that make it fairly easy or relatively easy to come up with a price. I might get an opinion from you, Lorenzo, and say, hey, you tell me what you think this, and I'll tell the seller that. I go, look, this one's a little bit tricky, really, to come up with a price, and I want to, be as upfront and just I want to bring in extra help to really figure out what should this home sell for.
That's a smart thing to do as well. To get another opinion, and we sometimes do that as well. We'll come to a special property, and we may engage other people, to ask for their professional opinion. If it's agricultural land that could be for development. We'll look at that as well and see, the highest and best use for this is going to be a future,
condo. They're all condos. Everything is condos.
Everything's like a, 70-story condo building in the middle of the city. But, most of our work is for lenders, private lenders or banks, and they rely on our appraisal. But no, absolutely. Some of the other reasons people get the appraisals for is for divorce. Or they've inherited property and for probate or for
The
estate
estate.
purposes.
Yeah,
that makes
that's
sense,
another
yeah.
reason we're getting it. A lot of reasons we're getting it right now is from even realtors. For that instance where we're in a market right now where it's changing. So they might say, I want to know what my home is, typically going to sell for. What's my data? What's my data? And we provide an unbiased opinion. I mean, I think that's one of the key instances, because as well, Santos, and as realtors, you can go into a home and get 3 or 4 different realtors, and they'll say, well, I think you should list your house for this price. I think you should be listing at this price. When we're doing our analysis, we're taking everything into context and say what's available, what's expired, and what's sold, and then we'll say, Mr. Homeowner, we think, or Mr. Banker, we think the value of the home is this value.
There's a big difference now. There are different appraisers out there. Not every appraiser is going to come out at the same value.
Correct. Yep.
The same data is available to everybody, but it as long as it's safe to say within a range, appraisers should kind of be.
We should be within a certain tolerance. What that tolerance is, it depends, on how you read the data. Hopefully there's not a 20-25% difference in value. But one of the things that we have to remember is that, and it's unfortunate, but we're more or less give a value. People are always stuck to one value. I think the price of that home is $1 million. Okay, and the people say, oh no, the appraisal says it's $1 million. But whether it's 970,000 or 1,030,000, you're in that range.
I use the word around. Until we got to pick a price,
Exactly.
I say around.
Yeah,
it's going to be, if it's 20,000 less or 20,000 more, it's still $1 million.
$1 million.
It can go either way. But that's where it's different between realtors.
Yeah.
Realtors have an agenda. Your agenda is, I got to come up with the appraised value, the market value, whatever you want to call it. That's your job, and to supply that information to whoever you're supposed to supply it for, the bank, the homeowner, whoever. The realtors have an alternate agenda. They want to get the listing. And the value of realtors can differ widely.
Exactly.
I have never, and I'm not saying this to, toot my own horn, but I have never given a price just to get the listing. I say this is my honest opinion, my professional honest opinion, and I show them the data, and I never on my own pick the price. It's with the based on what I just told you of what's sold and the competition, what's for sale, and this is how I interpret what the market's doing. I asked them, where do you think? What would you pay for your house right now if it was for sale? That's what I say.
Yep.
Now, if they're $200,000 more than what's obvious in the data that I'm showing him, I'm scratching my head saying, but how? Like, what's the argument for what you just said, $200,000 more than the value that is obviously presented? But I know there's other realtors, and I'm not trying to talk bad about other realtors, but I'm about to talk bad about other realtors.
We have them in all our businesses.
There are some realtors that will say yes just to get them to sign the listing and then beat them down for price reductions later. That's not my style. But I'm competing with that. And I know sellers will, some sellers, not all, some sellers will also look at the data and say, that realtor that said it's this price, they're just crazy. But other sellers will just gravitate to that because they're looking for some validation at their higher price and sign a listing with that person.
Yeah,
And then it's a mess all around.
Well, they're buying the listing.
They're buying the listing.
We're calling
That's
buying
right.
the listing, and then what we know as an appraiser. It's good you bring this point up because we've known each other for years.
Yes.
And when I come
And we still like each other.
Yeah, we're still buddies. We're still friends. And when I see your your listings, and I see how they're priced, and I see the work that you do in the listing. Other people may not see that, but the marketing and the showcasing the home, we see that as appraisers. And when we see an overpriced listing, that started off at, let's say, 1.3 million, but the real value is 1.1 million, and it's been on the market for 120 days, and then it's selling, and it's been reduced, and it's been changing from one real estate agent to another real estate agent. We have to ask ourselves: is there something wrong with that house?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those.
Well, that's what the public asks themselves.
What's wrong? How come it's been on the market for so long?
By the way, folks, this is not a paid advertisement. He said that on his own will, and I approve this message.
Yeah, I know. So we look at that. I mean, a lot of people ask me, realtors ask me too, how did you come up with your value? And I explain what we've done, what analysis we did. And, sometimes I'm calling the realtor as well and saying, well, you know what? Why did you get this value for this home? We anticipated it should have sold for X and you sold for Y. What was so different about that home? And then, we'll sit down and we'll say, oh, that house had, upgraded this, upgraded kitchen, upgraded. And as we're going through the pictures and looking at the home and we drive by the house, we say, okay, yeah, that's possible. And then, now we know why it's sold for that kind of value.
So I've been itching to ask this
10 minutes ago. Guy in the front. What's your question?
For about 6 minutes, I've been itching to ask this question. So we had in 2017, I mean, me and my dad covered it quite a bit, and I feel like we talk about this every podcast, but 2017 was crazy.
Crazy
right?
market.
Real estate prices were crazy. And, in my background at that time, I was working at a real estate law firm, and we saw many deals fall apart because appraisals just weren't coming in at the price that people were actually paying for them. And so I'm under the assumption that now what an appraiser says and what a realtor says are more along the lines similar in now, like this type of market. But so what happened in that time? What was the difference? Like
That was a crazy, crazy market. That's where, it started off. So gradual, and then it just took off.
Yeah. And so in that case, let's say, for example, a property is worth $1 million based on your estimate. A property is worth $1 million, but it's selling for 1.4, right? If that market value, if people are paying 1.4, why is it not getting appraised at 1.4? Like, what's the discrepancy there?
That's a big question. Yeah, it's a great question, and this is what I get all the time. Well, market value is what someone's going to pay for a property at that time. Mm-hmm. Yes and no. I mean, market value, you need a willing seller and a willing buyer, which you normally get, both informed. They all both have to have the same amount of data. Okay, and what I think is what most important is acting, in duress or not. Mm-hmm. So if you're forced to buy that house, if it's not being marketed for a long, for a normal period of time, that's going to affect your value.
Okay.
So if you're buying under duress because you have 14 other people in the driveway waiting to put in an offer,
you can see them. They're there. You're competing with them.
So you better come up higher than $1 million.
So that's the difference between, I guess, the realtors and the appraisers. The realtors will price it and try and sell it at what they can actually get for it, whereas you will give a price that's not what they will actually get for it. It's an unbiased opinion. So I mean, if you're jumping from 1 million.
I need to defend the realtor community for a second. When you say the realtors, my son, and soon you're going to have your license, you're going to be one of those the realtors.
I'm just saying,
there's the realtor on the listing side, right? Mm-hmm.
So you represent your seller.
We represent the seller. So our job, now I'm not talking about at the listing presentation, we're on the market now. Our job is to get the highest possible price, keeping all code and ethics in check, doing things the right way. Yep. But our job is to work in the best interest of the seller.
Yeah.
And if we can get another 20, 30, 50,000 for the house, we should be doing that.
Absolutely.
If the opportunity presents itself, or you create that opportunity. And one way is to get buyers bidding against each other and play one against the other. That's strategy. So we're well within our job to do that.
Market supply and demand.
Appraisers don't play any part in that.
Well, that's what I wanted to differentiate.
I'm going to give you a great example, if I may. This happened to us a couple of years back, and I can't remember, and I can't tell you exactly, the circumstances behind it. But we had a house A and a house B, and the father and mother lived in the house, and they had a child. The kids got married, and they had a child, and they needed babysitting. And, so they thought, what's the best thing to do? Grandparents, look after kids these days. So they approached the next door neighbor to buy the house. Now, the house was only worth $1 million, but the buyers who wanted to desperately live beside the parents because that was, they
Convenient.
wanted
Yeah.
convenient, and they went
It's thousands of dollars in daycare.
tens of thousands. So they overpaid for this house $100,000.
Oh, wow.
Okay, because for them it made sense.
Yeah.
They were a very
That's their
close
value,
family.
yeah.
They were united, and they wanted to bring up, their child with their grandparents. Babysitting and all. So when we went to appraise the house, we understood why they paid $1.1 million. However, if that house was put on the market tomorrow, it wasn't valued at $1.1 million.
Yeah.
So we had to give the most realistic value, a reasonable and supportable value. And that value of that home was, let's say, $1 million. And that's where you have a willing buyer and a willing seller, but the seller really wants that house.
Yeah.
No, the buyer really wants it.
The buyer, my apologies, the buyer really wants that house. So he may overpay for
Yeah.
that house. And that's where we have to come back and say, whoa, hold back a little bit. This is what we think the value of the home is.
And so there's no difference between that and the buyer being parked on the road with 4 other buyers bidding on the same house.
Well, think about back to 2017.
It's happening now, though.
Yeah,
it's
it
happening
is.
now.
Yeah,
The
it
market is.
I was about to plug our new market report coming out soon, but
Go ahead. Danny, go ahead.
yeah.
It is
So
happening.
2017 is happening again.
Well,
Find out in our new
2017
market
was a
report.
crazy market.
Yeah.
We've got, and our new market report is about to come out.
Yeah.
The January numbers are
Looking
in.
forward to seeing that.
The January numbers are in, and there are, and if we're just talking, just Vaughan, there's many neighborhoods in Vaughan that are showing now 2017 prices.
Yeah, absolutely.
And across the GTA, there's many neighborhoods. One of the hottest markets. Well, actually, I'm now getting into the market report. Stay tuned for our market report to find out
Coming
one of the
up.
hottest markets.
It is. It is.
So, so if the appraisal comes in lower than expected, so the bank says, hey, buyer Bob is applying for a mortgage, there's a financing condition, and the bank wants to decide, do we give them the money? Because you can go and get a pre-approval. There's always conditions. It's not 100% for sure that the bank is giving you that money just because you're pre-approved. One of the conditions is that the bank wants to actually know what you're actually buying. So they're not going to give you $1 million on a house that's worth $750,000.
Exactly.
So then the appraisal comes in. Well, what if that appraisal comes in lower than expected? We said in our discussion here it can, but what happens now? Like, what if it comes in lower than expected?
So,
What are there repercussions?
oh, sure there are. Absolutely there are. So let's say, for example, and I'd like to use $1 million because it's an easy number to use.
Yeah, everybody's got $1 million. Everybody understands.
Everyone buys $1 million home. So let's assume you're buying a home for $1 million, and our appraisal comes in at $900,000 because that's the actual market value of that home. The seller, the buyer, has to make up the difference.
Right.
He's got to make up the difference, whether
okay.
it's going to a family member or going into his savings and come up with that difference in value. As an appraiser, the question is, well, wait a minute. We paid $1 million for this. You're coming up to $900,000. Why? And then we explain this is the process that we used, and these are our comparables.
Yeah.
And if there's any question or there's any doubt, we always push it back to the homeowner or the realtor or the seller.
I've had those conversations
Exactly.
with appraisers.
Yeah. And we sit down and we say, not sit down face to face because there's always that line there. We always ask, okay, so let me ask you, what as a buyer agent or as a seller agent, what did you use as comparables? If I've missed something, let me know. I'm the first one to admit if we've missed something because we do a thorough job, but sometimes you may miss something.
We're all human.
Yeah, we're all human. So then I'll say, what type of data did you use? And then they'll send me, and we say, well, we use this as an appraiser, as a value. And then I'll look at it and say, you know what? I wish I could have used this one. However, it's in the opposite, part of town.
Yeah.
It's 4 kilometers away, and it backs onto a ravine. We can't use that. Or we'll look at another one. They'll say, oh yeah, I wish I could have used this one. However, you're 800 square feet bigger, and your basement is completely finished, and ours is not, and we're it's a smaller home, and we sold for less than that. So why would that house be worth what you're giving me as comparables? And 9 out of 10 times, it makes sense, and they say, well, and then at the end of the day, it's, they really wanted this house, and there was nothing available. So then they may have paid an overprice for it. So that's what we look at. So when there's a dispute in value, we always kind of throw it back and say, provide us with some information that you think it's worth.
Okay, so apart from the obvious factors that come into you doing an appraisal, obvious factors that will affect the price are what recently sold, things that's obvious. You pull up the last listing that sold, and you compare homes. That's just obvious. What are some of the unobvious things that will affect the appraised value?
So we look at, how can I put it down in layman terms? Like, okay, so let's say, for example, you're looking to buy a car. Okay, and you've got an Altima, let's say it's a Nissan, and you walk into a dealership and you see one that's listed for $33,000, and then you go to another one and it's $45,000. Okay, first off, you're saying, what's the difference? I went to one dealership, it's 33, and now it's 45. But as you look deeper into that car, you'll find out that the one at $45,000 has a bigger engine, has heated seats, has leather seats, has all power windows, power everything. It's top of the line. So when we're looking at a home, we look at more or less at the same. What's the difference between home A and B? Looks the same from the outside. Okay, brick facade, 2-car garage, 2-story home. However, when you go inside the house, you see the different floor plan. You see that house A may have a ceramic tile flooring, throughout, hardwood flooring in the living room, dining room, bedrooms, whereas, one of the other comparables may be broadloom. It's dated, it's older. The kitchen that you're appraising, the house that you're appraising had a brand new kitchen put in.
Does staging play a factor?
Oh, sure it does. I mean, we're all visual. So when we're going through a home and we're seeing a house, we're seeing the layout. Okay, it's important, and we're looking at the house in general. Are there any holes in walls? Is it a hoarder's house? Things like that. We look at. We look at everything. It makes a big difference.
I asked that knowing the answer, and I know some people make big mistakes when they set up the house for staging, and they set up. Some of the realtors, we always organize the house, do some staging, get it set before the professional photographer comes in. I know later on if somebody's looking at our house after it's sold, after it's off the market, and an appraiser's looking, they're going to see those photos, and they're going to have a certain impression, because you can't go into that house anymore. It's off the market, finished. 6 months later, you're doing an appraisal on another house on that street. You're going to look at our photos.
Exactly.
But when you look at a house and it's not set up the way it should, or you walk into the house, because I know it's sold, quick, get the staging stuff out because it costs money, quick, and then the appraiser comes in to do their appraisal for the bank. If that house isn't looking clean, neat, spotless, if it's not looking in its best possible condition, that can affect the price. I don't mean there's holes in the wall, but it's messy now. It smells of dog, where when it was for sale, they got rid of all the dog smell. It makes a difference, right?
It makes a difference. However, as appraisers, we're trained to look at what really makes a difference in that value and that price. So, I mean, a good example is when we're looking at your photos of a house that you sold, and we're comparing to that house, we're seeing the condition of that house based on the photos. So when I'm comparing it to a property that I'm inspecting today, which is not staged, or is not clean, or is not walls painted, and we have to make a certain adjustment to that, saying the condition is not as good. Okay, and then we have to formulate a value of how much of a condition adjustment we would give. Is it $3,000, $4,000 difference? Like we have to formulate a value to that. But as appraisers, when I'm appraising a home, we try to see beyond we did a hoarder's house once, and the first thing you think about it as hoarders is it's a mess. Well, this hoarder was different. He had everything just perfect. He kept everything, but it was perfect. The house was pristine. Okay,
An organized hoarder.
He was organized. He had everything. He had everything in, there was a lot of, I'm not going to say, there was a lot of debris, a lot of junk, but it was organized, okay? And it wasn't something that created a negative smell, or he was collecting books and magazines and things like that. So we looked beyond that and said, okay, all we have to do is take that out. But the house was perfect, hardwood flooring throughout.
So the fact that it was organized, even though it was jam-packed with stuff, the fact that it was organized helped him in his appraised value.
Well, no, not that it helped him in his appraised value.
It didn't create a negative.
It didn't hinder him.
Or as much as...
Yeah, I mean, we've been in hoarders' houses where it's complete opposite, where there's junk all over the place. And you can smell the mildew. There's water that came from plants or whatever is on the floor, and you can sense that. So we're trained to look beyond some of those things and say, okay, what has to be stripped out of the house? What is it going to cost to bring that house back to today's market value?
I gotcha.
Yeah, so that's that are the things we look at too.
You were going to ask a question?
I have another question. I don't know if it's a dumb question. It might be a dumb question.
We'll let you know. Lorenzo and I will
I think Lorenzo's probably too nice to let me know, but my dad will let me know if it's a dumb question. So I know, appraisals happen on houses all the time. What about condos? Do appraisals happen on condos?
Absolutely. Yeah, because you can overpay on a condo.
Yeah.
Yeah, people can overpay on a condo.
And what about...
these days... That's the first place you're overpaying. Condo market is completely crazy.
It's hot.
That's the first place you're overpaying.
Now, right now, the condo market has been leading the industry for years.
I was going to say we've been saying right now for 4 or 5 years now.
What about pre-construction, new builds? Appraisals don't happen on those, do they?
Oh, sure they do.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I mean, in the height of the market, when they were selling, in 2017, and it takes 2 years before that phase gets built, we're valuing a home based on today's market value, not on what they paid for it, back in the height of the market. And the reason for that is if a lender had to take that property over today, realistically, what could they get for that property? So we've come many instances where the market value that we've appraised the house is less than what they paid for it in the height of the boom in 2017.
So let's say someone bought something in 2015. Okay. They signed an agreement for a condo, 1 bedroom for $400,000. And then 2017 comes and it's finally ready and everything's going crazy. And now this condo is probably worth, if they wanted to sell it, about $600,000. Like, how would the appraisal work on that? So it would still be appraised at 600?
Well,
is that what I'm getting?
See, we're hired to provide an unbiased opinion. What's that property worth today? Okay. So realistically, if they paid $350,000 for it and it's worth $600,000, well, that's the value.
Yeah,
it's $600,000. Now the bank has a decision to make, and the bank says, do we lend on the appraised value or on the purchased value?
Yeah,
that's a lending decision. It has nothing to do with us.
It can vary based on the time of the pre-construction, because a lot of these things take years to build, right?
Exactly.
So it can vary quite a bit. Okay,
it's funny you say that. We're running through that instance right now.
Oh, really?
Where it was bought in 2014, and it took this developer a long time to build, and now it's coming into fruition. Now, kudos to the developer. He didn't, crash the deal.
He that's
says,
true.
Okay, we have a contract and we're going through it.
Right.
Wow. And some developers have also, and builders have given back rebates. They've known that they sold at a high point of the market. And now the buyer can't get the value of that home, and they've some builders have knocked back the value a little bit.
Wow. If there's builders listening, which I know there's some builders listening to this, I've had conversations. They're going like this right now. Don't say that to everybody.
It's better than having a deal go south.
Right.
Oh, that's awesome.
How long does an appraisal take, and what does it cost?
Costs vary. I mean,
And a
it
typical,
gives-
say,
yeah.
2,500 square foot house, we'll use that as an example.
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, it all depends on the neighborhood, the area, but, our fees, and fees vary within the marketplace. You're looking at anywhere between 400, 450 and up, for an appraisal. We try to be as fair as possible, but also depends on the complexity. If it's a house that is 5,000 square foot in a neighborhood that backs onto a ravine, and it's in an exclusive neighborhood, and it's going to take a long time to do your analysis.
And they're all custom homes.
That's going to cost more money to do.
Of course.
More time.
More time. To do. It's easy. I wish we could just walk into the house, take a look at it, and say, okay, this is what we think it is. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
But our fees vary. We've done homes that are on, custom built homes, 8,000, to 10,000 square feet, and our fees
takes you half a day to walk through those.
Yeah, it is. Our fees for that, would be upwards and over $2,000. So. But we try to be as fair, and our industry tries to be as fair as possible. Also, if it's for a second mortgage financing, or if it's a private lender and you have to, drive an hour away to do it because they want you to do it, time, you have to pay for mileage and things like that.
Right.
Like any industry.
Like any industry. Makes sense.
Does the bank pay for that sometimes, or is it
No, most of our industry, well, the appraisals that we do are, for private, more or less private lenders or, B lenders, and typically it's the homeowner or the person wanting the appraisal value done on their home that pays for the appraisal.
now that I think about it, I think that...
Sorry, I mean to cut you off. I didn't mean to,
of
but
course.
I'm cutting you off, Danny. I want to get this.
You need
this
to do
out
it at
there.
least once a podcast.
The mortgage broker that we promote, Racky from Mortgage Savvy, she covers the appraisal side. I'm plugging Racky out there.
Yeah.
She covers the cost of when the bank orders the appraisal. She normally
normally covers. That's good.
She normally covers the cost.
I just remember, now that I think back to my days at the real estate law firm there, a lot of this stuff gets deducted at when they're actually dispersing the funds. Now that I think about it, so if let's say you're getting a mortgage for $500,000 and they're advancing you $500,000, or let's say $475,000, they'll take off an extra $300 for an appraisal fee when they actually give you that money to go purchase your property.
They're charging the buyer then.
Yeah, so they are charging the buyer. Now
some lenders may do that.
Yeah.
It all depends on the relationship.
Racky from Mortgage Savvy covers the cost of that.
As appraisers, we have to remember, although the homeowner may be paying for the appraisal, he's paying for or he or she is paying for the service of us coming there to do our analysis.
Yeah.
The actual appraisal, copy goes to the lender. The lender is the one who owns that data, who owns that appraisal. Yeah. And you have to remember, and I don't know if we touched on this early, but unfortunately, in every industry, there's some sort of fraud. And in the real estate industry, there's a lot of fraud.
Oh, we did.
Say it isn't so.
Well, I mean, there might be some things where an appraisal is put out there to the public, and then it gets into someone's savvy hands, and they're able to
they change the numbers.
Yeah. So that's why typically the homeowner doesn't get a copy of or the person who paid for it doesn't get a copy.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Well, they have an invested interest. See, there's an agenda. The mortgage broker obviously doesn't get paid unless the mortgage goes through. Yeah. So the realtor doesn't get paid unless the mortgage goes through. And the seller doesn't actually sell their home and get paid unless the mortgage goes through.
Yeah.
The appraiser gets paid no matter what, because their job is to give their professional opinion appraised value and give it. So you don't have really a pony in the game, so to speak, in the race. That's your job is just to give that value.
This is our value. It is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah. Whether the home sells or not, it doesn't matter. You got, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, but that's your job. That you get paid for that.
That's good.
You got no ulterior motive.
Well,
whether it sells or not makes no difference to you.
Yeah.
You give that to the lender, the person that actually has truly the most to risk, which is the bank that has just lent out $500,000, $1 million, whatever,
lender.
or the private lender, whoever is lending. needs to see the real number.
And
They've got the most to risk.
And I'm glad you get that, because a lot of people don't get that. There's the risk, you know, and you know, they have to know, what if I had to take over this property today, typically what could I get on the market?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's without struggling. Like the bank is not going to lend you money and think, if you don't pay and we got to take over the house and sell it.
What can I sell it for?
Yeah, the bank wants it, like it's got to be like a for sure we're going to get this amount and recover our money, as opposed to, well, if conditions were like this and like that, then
Is that the reason for the 20% deposit when you're in the mortgages?
I think no, because you can get 95% financing. I think 95% through the Canada Mortgage and Housing, like some
depends on your credit rating, depends on all sorts of things. But
don't
you
most
can,
like the big banks only do 20%?
no,
Really?
you can get a lot of mortgages putting 5% down.
Oh snap!
They might go private, private, but you know that's the whole idea, is that the person relying on our appraisal can realistically rely on, say, you know what, this makes sense. It is worth $1 million and not 1.3 million, like you know the homeowner says.
Yeah,
you know?
That's good. Imagine if we didn't have appraisers in this world. Jesus, who knows?
Then realtors would be running rampant, more so than they are now. Nobody's keeping the realtors in check.
All the realtors
We're
will be retired.
we're either loved or we're hated, one or the other, or somewhere
funny.
in between.
Lorenzo,
That's right.
this has been great.
Yes.
Thank you very much
You're
for
welcome.
taking time out and spending some time. And it's been educational for me. And I deal with appraisers. I deal with you. It's been educational. Thank you very much for this.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's great to be. I wish we had more time, because we could talk days.
Yeah, you know what?
appraising and
We'll
real
come back
estate.
and do this
Yeah,
again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
No one can see it, but our clock that tells us how long we've been running has died.
Oh.
So, but we talked for about an hour.
No.
Yeah, it was 51 minutes.
Well, we got to cut some stuff out.
I don't know. We can. It was so good.
Each time you ask
Edit
the
it,
question, we'll cut Danny's questions out of there.
It was great. It was great.
Thank you very much.
Wait, hold
Thank
on,
you
Dad.
for-
We got to ask the guest if there's anything they want to promote.
Oh,
You
for
know,
sure.
do you have a website someone can visit you at, or whatever the case is?
You know what? Our website is very easy. We're called Sharp Appraisal. We give sharp values and sharp attention to detail.
There's the tagline.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there it
look
is.
at that.
Yeah. We're always sharply dressed. Well, we've been in business for over, as an appraiser for 20 years. Our firm has been around since maybe about 4 years now. And like I said, we have, good appraisers. We cover a wide area, and we enjoy what we do. We love it.
That's
We
good
get
to hear, and
know-
it's nice to know that we're supporting local businesses here.
Yes.
Here on Team Sessa Talks,
But they
we
work
support
anywhere.
local businesses.
They work anywhere. So you're located in Vaughan, but
Yes.
anywhere across the GTA, as long as they can drive there within a few hours, they're good.
We're okay.
They're okay.
If you need appraisals, you call Lorenzo. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is, you can find this podcast on YouTube. You can also find it on, why do I say this every single time?
I don't know.
I say this every single time, but if they're watching, they don't need to know where to find it. If you want to send this to someone, you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and just about anywhere else you get your podcast.
Say goodbye, Danny.
And yes, so that is it. Thank you, and we'll see you again soon.
Bye, everybody.
Ciao.